Up next, we have a panel discussion on operational excellence that is going to be moderated by one of my colleagues, Mitchell Osak. Mitchell is the Managing Director of Strategic Advisory Services at Grant Thornton. He has over 25 years of senior consulting experience in a variety of organizations under diverse operating and marketing conditions. He is considered a North American thought leader in the areas of strategy development, organizational design, digital transformation, and performance improvement. He's regularly asked to comment on the cannabis industry in both national and trade media on topics such as marketing, branding, M&A, and operating model design. Mitchell has deep consulting experience across the entire cannabis ecosystem, from growers to extractors to retailers and governments. Other consulting experience includes Fortune 1000 clients. Please welcome Mitchell to the stage.
Thank you. Good morning.
That was his walk-on music?
Yeah, and my daughter's favorite song. Thank you very much, Tricia. Did my mother send you that bio? Because that's more than gracious. It's my pleasure and honor to be here today to facilitate a panel of what I consider operational experts. And based on a lot of what Tricia just said, these are really experts in expert best-in-class firms. So I just want to invite them all up, and I'm going to ask them to come up, sit down wherever you folks want, and just briefly introduce yourself. I'm going to ask Dieter MacPherson, Dan Sutton, John Cervini, and Ryan Lee to come up, please. I'm going, hey. Now, where is... there he is. And is Ryan here? Oh. Okay. Luckily, okay. Gentlemen, why don't you, Dieter, we can start with you. Why don't you give a quick introduction, who you are, and what company you represent?
Sure. So my name is Dieter MacPherson. I'm the Senior Vice President of Operations for Aurora Cannabis. My day-to-day job entails pretty much anything cannabis related. So the operation of 8 facilities here in Canada and a number of them across the globe. Some of them indoor, a lot more of them now moving to greenhouse, so I'm in the right neighborhood to talk about that. And although I'd like to think I'm an expert, all of us are learning so incredibly fast through error or acquisition or just good old knowledge generation that sometimes there is no right answer, but that should be a lot of fun to disagree on the panel about.
I hope we do that.
Yeah.
My name's Dan Sutton, and today I'll be playing the role of Dr. Ravencourt, the VP of Operations from CannTrust, who unfortunately couldn't make it. But actually, I'm the CEO of a little firm in British Columbia called Tantalus Labs. We've got just 75,000 square feet of greenhouse that's fully licensed by Health Canada for sales today. We focus on interesting genetics, unique genetics. We've got an excellent breeding program and phenotyping program. And as the CEO of a team that's just 32 people, I get to interact with some of the finest operators in British Columbia in the greenhouse context, and I've been able to learn a lot from them. And so I'll be representing their voice today, and I'm sure there'll be many questions that these other operators will be better equipped to answer, but I'll do my best to represent my team.
Good morning. My name is John Cervini, Senior VP from Infrastructure and Technology at Aphria. As all of you heard, Vic did a great job introducing Aphria and what we're all about, so I'll not talk too much about that at the present moment. I'm born and raised in Leamington here, 4th generation vegetable farmer till about 6 years ago, and got into cannabis with Cole Cachavalani, my other co-founder, and it's been quite an experience to say the least. When we put the first license in 5 years ago, we had no expectation that Aphria would grow at this rate. We had no expectation that medical cannabis in Canada would turn into legal cannabis in Canada, and let alone span the world as it is. So it's been very exciting, very interesting to say the least. Operationally, and what we're going to get into on this panel, it's very exciting to see the changes, how we've been able to bring and pull technology from other industries and bring it into the cannabis world is really exciting, and I'm happy to be here to be on the panel today and talk about it.
My name is Ryan Lee. I'm a plant breeder and cannabis researcher. I've been looking at the plant for about 25 years from a pretty scientific perspective. My company is the Chemovar Corporation. We specifically focus on intellectual property development and creating new varieties with specialized chemical profiles. There's much more to cannabis than just THC and CBD, and we have a lot of experience in that area. We also do genetic imports for LPs, so that's kind of what we do.
Great, thank you guys. Some quick housekeeping. We're going to have a robust, fulsome panel today for about 45 minutes, schedule permitting, and then we're going to open it up to questions, both questions from the audience as well as crowdsourced questions, which is where a lot of this list came from. So we're going to have opportunities for a lot of participation, number one. Number two, it's important to define terms for many of you who don't know the cannabis industry. So when I think about operations, and some of my questions are going to address this, it's going to be anywhere from growing and IT systems to supply chain and regulatory compliance. So we're going to look at the full gamut of operations. Number three, what I'll just say is, based on my experience in the industry and based on what's just happened in the last couple of weeks, many pundits, myself excluded, believe that operations are going to drive future performance and who's going to win in this business. And Vic had that fantastic slide that showed 4 key success factors. Three of them are significantly influenced, if not driven, off of operations. So you're going to get the secret sauce based on a variety of licensed producers as well as genetics folks who've seen it from all different angles. So using that as a segue, Dieter, let me start with you. It's self-evident that the industry is completely changed on October 17th with recreational. How do you manage the transition from a sort of lower volume, direct-to-consumer medical model to something that's sort of mass scale by different markets in terms of efficiency, scalability, quality, and so on and so forth?
Starting with a very easy question, I see.
Yeah.
Well, the alcohol industry surprisingly had a long time to grow. So it started off prohibition, it shifted, and it moved into a model of large-scale production and distribution over, call it, 2 decades. We were expected to work with their customers, which are the liquor boards of each province, in about 14 months. Mm-hmm. So finding key assets and people that know those supply chain problems, because the number one thing you have to deal with is going to be unforeseen problems, either because my breadth of experience wasn't wide enough to know the specifics, or because the laws and regulations had just come into force and effect, so they had interesting impacts. You've heard about, say, tax stamps. So in a lot of these situations, there were single suppliers or single vendors that also weren't ready, and those are some of the knock-on impacts. So one of them was coming up with a clear strategy early, partnering with strong companies in 3PL, so your third-party logistics and distribution, building up ramping up ahead of the demand, whether that be human resources or the license capacity, the space to do what you need to do. And then really when it came down to it, working 24/7 for 9 weeks to make sure that you could solve the problems on the ground as they happen, and there were many. If I ever had to do this again, there's probably some lessons that I would take from it. I would focus on more dry runs. So really test your supply chain and your logistics as much as possible. So bottle everything, put the labels on it, no cannabis in the bottles, send them out, bring them back, send them out, bring them back. I would have done a lot more of that. Planning should alleviate some of those 24-hour days, I would hope. But yeah, finding those key partnerships. You can't learn everything in-house. And I think Vic talked about this, they're Southern Glazers. They went to somebody that had a lot of that experience. So you mitigate where possible. Where not, you just work. Would be the short answer.
Well, a short and more than a complete answer. Dan, what can you add to that? Because you're in a different part of the journey right now.
So I had a really interesting discussion in New York in 2016. I was at the UN General Assembly Special Summit where actually legalization was announced by our health minister, speaking...
420.
Yeah, did she announce it on 420? No, she said it was going to be on 420. No, she announced it on 420. Anyway, it was a great networking event when travel to the United States was a little less contentious for Canadian cannabis professionals. And I was there to talk as an industry face in an academic conference about the implications of legalization and social progress. Now, that's just the context for me sitting down at a bar and talking to a specialist who focused on the launch of premium wine brands. Now, premium wine brands are an interesting thing to launch because most of our context around high-value wine products comes with history, 100 years of history. And when you invest in a $200, $500 bottle of wine, you're generally buying a lot of agricultural principles, how to differentiate in your cultivation, in your terroir, and then also the process of what makes that wine unique, and that's been proven over multiple generations. So when you launch a premium offering in wine, you've got to take that 100 years of history and turn it into a 5-minute story that's really easy to digest. And this individual spoke to me about essentially supply control to be able to maintain always pent-up demand, always excess demand. This is product-first branding, where you take the offering of a novel wine product, something interesting, something differentiated, and you ensure that if you have 1,000 units to sell, you have 1,200 units of demand. And the next sales cycle, if you have 1,500 units to sell, you need to maintain 1,700 units of demand. It's always a story about scarcity, which at 75,000 square feet of British Columbian production is a lot easier of a story to tell than the context of Aphria or Aurora. But we look at it like, if we can take that product-first branding and actually turn it into an exciting proposition for not just our customer base, which hopefully will be pulling the retailers towards a brand like Tantalus Labs, that will then translate into those retailers as well. And retailer-first marketing is an important part of our context, but I think it boils down in our principle to an analogy that I'm definitely going to get in trouble from my team for saying. Advertising is me paying to stand on a soapbox and tell you all that I am good in bed.
Sorry, this is a different panel than that one.
Marketing, let me finish the analogy, and then you move on to the professionals after I'm done. Marketing is me paying someone to stand beside me and yell, "This guy is good in bed." Branding is when a beautiful man or woman comes up to me and whispers in my ear, "I hear that you're good in bed."
It's a good analogy.
Oh, okay. Speaking of good in bed, I want to include Ryan and John in this conversation as well. I never like being the anchor person at the end of these panels because other than that analogy, all the best insights are typically taken, particularly with these fellows. So what I want to do is switch gears a little bit and talk about genetics. And I'm going to start on Ryan's end and work in. So Ryan, you are much heralded as a genetics expert as it pertains to cannabis. So operationally, what should licensed producers and product companies think about? How should they use genetics in terms of boosting operational performance, scalability, quality, and so on and so forth?
Well, genetics is really the foundation of the entire industry. Without the plant, we wouldn't have anything. And up until today, I don't think our industry has done a very good job of exploiting the genetic potential that exists within the species. We all know about THC and CBD, but there's also a whole series of other chemical compounds that the plant or some specific varieties of the species can produce that aren't being exploited in the market, and they have a huge therapeutic value. So that's one big aspect that I think we're going to see roll out in the next few years, a lot of more of these diverse cannabinoids that have therapeutic value. The other end of the spectrum is from a consumer preference, and really different types of cannabis, different flavors of cannabis, different effects of cannabis are what make the foundation of the different product SKUs that we'll see on the marketplace. So it's not good enough to just have 5 flavors on the menu. Really, a diverse cannabis company would like to have, or you would think they would like to have, a diverse product offering where just like we have in wine, it's like we can break it down into red and white wine, but I think anybody that appreciates wine knows that there's so much more to it than that.
Right.
And so genetics really is the foundation for all of that.
John, can you give us some insights in terms of what Aphria is doing regarding genetics and building out this full gamut of product?
Yeah, sure. I think, right from the beginning, I think we recognized at Aphria that genetics were probably the weakest link in the whole system. If you think back on the cannabis industry and what it is, it's been illegal around the world for as long as we can remember today. So there's been very little genetic work done, and any of the work that's been done has been relatively very poor compared to actual regular agriculture. Mm-hmm. So when Ryan's doing work, it's exciting to see somebody actually doing it at a professional level. We've absolutely been doing our own in-house genetic work, but I don't think it's going to compare to an actual professional genetic company coming along the way and really developing and creating varieties like Vic alluded to earlier, mm-hmm. that have some resistance to powdery mildew, have resistance to botrytis and other diseases. If you look at all the other agricultural crops in the world, it's really the genetics that really pull the production, pull the quality, and really create great tomatoes, cucumbers, flowers, whatever you want to talk about. So I think if you really look at the opportunity that genetics brings for cannabis globally, it's a huge opportunity. And then I think when you look at what it's going to do operationally, it's definitely going to help increase production overall, increasing our cost of production for everybody. But then allowing us to really pinpoint things, so you can work on pinpointing CBD and THC, going after real illnesses, and then on the recreational front, really helping us create new and innovative products for the rec users. So really, there's a lot of opportunity with the genetic side.
Great. So keeping with the theme of increasing production and capacity, I'm going to jump right back to Dieter. What is the best way, in your opinion, I have to put you on the spot here, to ramp up production and ramp up capacity? Looking at the full gamut of retrofitting or purpose-built greenhouses, all of the nuts and bolts stuff that you deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, going for some controversy, I guess. The retrofit.
Yeah, I promise, Greg.
I'll do that. I would hedge with, I don't think anybody has a perfect answer. I think a lot of this depends on your experience and where your bench strength is in a company. If I've never run an indoor facility, I'm certainly not going to go build 1 million square feet and hope that I'm able to ramp it up. Greenhouses on a cost per square foot basis, time to build, efficiency over time, margin reduction, because we're all heading into a margin crunch, which is where all of this really becomes important, whether it be genetics, efficiency, and automation, it is likely to be the future. And I'll go out on a limb and say, I think in many cases it'll beat outdoor production, certainly for non-fungible cannabis, so the type that you can't just swap around in the market. Cannabinoids we think of as a commodity. The cannabis itself is a non-fungible ingredient, so bud to bud, they can be very different. I think a greenhouse can serve both those markets. They're faster to build. There's a lot more inherent large-scale commercial experience in greenhouses than in indoor production. I can't think of many other crops that are produced in an indoor bunker in the bottom of a basement. Having said that, I operate over 300,000 square feet of indoor production, so I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot. Come on now. Nice. I think there's a place for both. But those greenhouses and purpose-built gives you a lot of advantages over a retrofit. Once upon a time, everybody was looking at retrofit because there wasn't a whole lot of institutional know-how about how to build cannabis-specific greenhouses. So if you want to go break a system to learn how to improve it, go buy a retrofit, work within it, find out what doesn't work, then you can start designing your own go forward. So we have Alps, Aurora Larson projects where we once partnered on Aurora Sky, but since then have acquired them and turned them into our institutional basket where we move all of our experts in, and we're now designing. We've got just over 3 million square feet of greenhouse under construction, and that is where we're improving, and we are definitely focused on purpose-built, purpose-designed, so you can get the automation in there. If you want to take a 15 or 16-foot peak greenhouse and then put automation in it, good luck. So you have to design from the start with those things in mind, and it may be a little more expensive at the beginning, but when you amortize that over a 25-year lifespan of the facility, boy, is it going to be a heck of a lot cheaper.
I'm going to lead the next witness a little bit. Dan, do you agree with everything Dieter just said?
Loaded.
Yeah. I mean, I never agree with everything that Dieter says.
I love you too.
No, I mean, I have a limited experience in purpose-built greenhouses, which was an interesting design, build, operate project. But the more we explored it, the more we realized that we're really trying to take a limited subset of geographical areas in Canada that are optimized to cultivate cannabis and nudge those areas in the right direction. Now, in the Fraser Valley in British Columbia, we have a lower fluctuation in temperature across seasons. We also have a lower light level. So there's advantages to where we are, there's disadvantages to where we are, and there's a unique attitude that we need to take to purpose build or to solve those problems in an existing greenhouse. There are existing greenhouses in the Fraser Valley that are converting to cannabis production. Some of them are a bit hurried. Some of them have had mixed success. Others, I think, will be strong backbones of the Canadian cannabis industry from an agricultural context. But I think genetics has a far larger role to play. Whether you are actively converting a greenhouse or you're building your own, look at an analogy in corn. Michael Pollan has an excellent book that he just came out with called The Omnivore's Dilemma. It's a little dry. If you're an agricultural person, you'll probably get into it, but it looks at the underpinnings of the corn industry in the United States, which really, the corn syrup as well as cattle production, a variety of different food crops, all rely on corn as its backbone. 90% of the corn industry is about 5 cultivars. Am I correct in this, Ryan?
Yeah, it's really refined elite germplasm with corn. Yeah,
Monocrops.
So of those 5, 2 of them really dominate the majority of that market. I'm a strong believer in the non-fungibility of cannabis bud, but cannabinoids are commodities by their nature. They're a molecule. And there will be genetics teams that find those varietals that maximize the productivity, or rather optimize THC potency with the productivity of the plant, and then bring in the disease resistance that I think would be a godsend to some of the LPs that have moved too fast and are having problems with significant and persistent crop loss, which is a problem in our industry. So you can have a decent greenhouse infrastructure. My greenhouse is a spaceship. It's a 75,000 square foot, very expensive per square foot, really specialized production environment. And even I will say that I could have a less specialized production environment if I had the cultivars that would thrive in it, whether we were pounding them with powdery mildew, whether we were in an area that was plagued with pests and other issues. And so I think that genetics piece will really solve a lot of this debate.
So Ryan, could you add any more color commentary to that, because you're the genetics?
Well, again, genetics is, there's many different ways to grow cannabis, I think, is something to get off right off the start. And if we talk about purpose-built versus retrofit, even some of the purpose-built facilities have limitations in terms of, they have these crane systems, for example, that move tables around, but because of the limited height in the greenhouses, you can only grow plants of a certain height. And that's, really a problem when certain varieties or varieties that are in demand in the marketplace are taller and less yielding. So there's lots of room to be done on simple architecture breeding on plants to make them fit the specific production environment. But obviously also in terms of all the disease resistance and everything, that's a big deal.
So that's a good segue to me picking on the other large licensed producer on the panel. John.
Yeah.
Risk factors. The gentleman here have alluded to. Sorry, do you want to say one more?
I got to add a little bit more to
Please.
This, so just to be clear, when we talk about greenhouses, that Aphria led the way in the greenhouse. So we took a lot of arrows early on in the industry, because a lot of people said you couldn't even grow in a greenhouse. You couldn't grow cannabis in a greenhouse, and we carried that flag high and proud, and we're all here today because of it. I think it's it's just the logical thing that we should be doing. And I think to carry on that, I think purpose-built is definitely better than a retrofit, and we've done both. We're doing both, but I think when the opportunity is right, purpose-built is the right way to absolutely do it. And I think the interesting thing about purpose-built, and the interesting thing about this industry, and I didn't talk about the very first question, but change management is really a big thing here, because we still don't know where everything's going to be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years from now. If we look back what we've done in the last 5 years, the change has been tremendous. Health Canada is still changing rules. We have to expect that things are going to change even
without telling us.
In a legalized world, without telling us. So even when you build a purpose-built facility, you have to leave room or leave opportunity to think, okay, what are they going to change on us? How is this going to change? How is the market going to change this? So purpose-built's the way to go, and obviously just wanted to make sure I got our spot in that.
Okay, so I don't want to leave anybody's plug out, but let me, pivot on one of the questions you just said. Like, how do you know how do all of you know what you don't know? Well, anybody want to jump in, John?
So I think
very esoteric question.
Yeah, we don't know what we don't know, but I think we need to leave room or leave opportunity to plan. So when we're planning, there's always planning for change. So as part of that planning process, you need to have an opportunity, or you need to expect that things are going to change. Something's going to come around the corner that you don't see, and you need to know that it's there. And then the other layer that you always have to add, and Vic touched on it, is leadership. So we need to build teams with people from other disciplines, from other areas, that bring different sets of expertise, that can help us anticipate those changes, or help us anticipate how to fix that problem when something comes around the corner that Health Canada may have changed on it, or the marketing department might want different, or one of the provincial governments want something done differently. So
I'd add that process design and system design should always include failure mode effect analysis. So actually modeling failure as part of what a system will do, and then figuring out which are the most critical ones, and then you build in buffer or alternatives in those systems. And if you do FMEA, or there's a lot of other methods to do this, you'll start to realize the things that you think are the most critical aren't. Good example is a partial failure in irrigation is far more dangerous than a complete one. A complete one you'll notice within 48 hours. Partial you may not actually see. That also leads into, if you're not measuring it, you can't improve it. So develop KPIs around where you want your business to go, trend it, have your leading and lagging, and be fastidious about tracking it so that you know when things are starting to go wrong and fail. And you can actually build KPI about your regulatory robustness. Like, these exist in other industries, so you can go out and find that data to know whether or not you've assessed what you don't know. My grad quote was, "Education is the gradual realization of one's ignorance." At this point in time, I'm a complete idiot. So it's just kind of the way it goes.
So could I ask what Aurora's KPIs are?
Oh, I'm not going to share those.
Okay.
But there's you've got standard ones. You've got time to release, THC per square foot per annum per kilowatt. You start building them out. More importantly, you need the systems and tools, and Dan's actually has done a very good job at his IoT systems and data gathering. And then you find a BI tool and build those insights, because when you get to 1,700 people, if you don't have a strategy for data management and communication so everybody can track what's going on, you're going to fall apart. Like, absolutely. And we've done really well. We built a matrix organization that includes those strong KPIs, but they always need improving, especially now when you get into rec, 17 countries, multiple distribution channels. Boy, it's a lot of information to manage.
So Dan, Dieter just gave you a breakaway pass, and you're coming in on goals. So what can you add from an operational, even a technology perspective?
Yeah, technology is a huge part of our business, because I was born and raised in Vancouver, and we've got a really interesting tech sector there. And I look at, you say, how do you know what you don't know? Well, the fundamental principles of how we need to grow and operate as a business aren't very different than any other industry. I think we've got a large regulatory burden, which represents a known unknown at times. They do move goalposts, they do adapt, but being aware that essentially they're looking for very thorough and granular reporting, and that reporting will add a burden to your labor costs that you need to automate and create efficiencies for over time. And I think that is where software for us makes a huge impact. We've got a group that we're working with called Elevated Signals out of UBC, and they've actually spent 2 years at Sun Lab, which is our facility in Maple Ridge, going through all of our SOPs, all of our operational processes as we're actually doing them, and looking at these thousands of pages of documents to how they take that to an actual user interface where our operators are working through their day, and as the reporting requirements come up, which are incredibly granular, the sanitization of your door handles down to the minute signed by somebody, you could have portfolio of a catalog of binders to be filling all this stuff out on a day-to-day basis to make your production batch records actually happen. We've boiled it down to a non-LTE connected smartphone that's just Wi-Fi connected, where they can actually just add that stuff in as they go. And we estimate that it probably reduces our labor obligation by 30 or 40% per square foot relative to other operators that we see in the space. So lean operations are a huge part of our story because we're not a publicly traded company. We have to be very cautious with cash flow, and we have to be very mindful of being a lean enterprise. And labor in any greenhouse operation will represent, what, up to 50% of your costs?
Sure. Yeah, if you're not using lights, yeah, easily.
Yeah, up to. Let's say the lossy guys, not the efficient guys like Aphria, but the people that are just throwing bodies at the problem. That's not a sustainable solution long term. And software can create, it's not automation like robots, it's automation of continuous manual input processes that can be smoothed out over effective interface that then ports back to a data pool. Like you can draw, my favorite thing about it is that when Health Canada comes to inspect us, which happens less and less luckily now, we can press a button and print everything that they need to know specifically to their request.
John, do you have anything to add from the Aphria experience based on what these two gentlemen just said?
Excuse me. Well, there's no question as we're adding automation and adding technology as far as IT technology and computer software behind that to track that and put it all together. It's definitely integral to cost control and scalability. That was really the main focus when we started with all the automation. The automation for us is the ground layer of being able to scale up, and then with that automation automatically comes that IT infrastructure that tracks and pulls it all together. So it's an absolute must for scaling and moving into the future where we're going.
Right, and is a lot of that automation and that IT, is that helping, doing scenario planning, rapidly adjusting to changes in consumer demand, that kind of stuff? Is it truly an end-to-end IT solution for you folks?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We're building out a full ERP system that ties all our systems together. So absolutely, you need that. You need that to scale.
Right. Good.
In terms of genetics and what we don't know, you really want to be able to expand SKUs as consumer trends change in the marketplace. So having a wide range of genetic portfolio that you can breed plants that are specific to a certain SKU or a certain market preference is really, really important. And the way the regulations rolled out, I think genetics were really quite restricted, or access to genetics was really quite restricted. So a lot of LPs are probably not in great shape to be able to handle what's coming down in the future.
Why aren't they?
It's just not available. A lot of these things, even these special rare cannabinoid profile plants, are not really available on the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And when people find them or breed them, they become proprietary. And people want to license that kind of stuff rather than, plants obviously are self-replicating. You can take a plant and make more seeds of it. So I think that's something that's happening to cannabis that's been quite openly shared for many generations, at least in the gray market, the black market culture. Right. But the true plants that are going to build the foundation of this industry moving forward, I think, have really yet to be developed in most cases. And it's really quite insane that we have these multi-billion-dollar companies that are growing plants that were, for all intents and purposes, selected in basements, right, from very small populations. That's just not the way you do agriculture.
So what would you tell these modest size and multi-billion-dollar licensed producers right now? How do they best use genetics right now?
Build portfolios and acquire as much as you can, which is, again, due to the regulations, is very difficult. And there's a certain homogeneity on the marketplace as well. Again, you can't go out and find a THCV line or a CBDV line. It's not something that you can find in the marketplace. You have to stumble across it. And that journey to finding these plants is really R&D intensive. You need a really heavy R&D budget to screen 25,000, 30,000 plants through a laboratory. And not only that, it's an opportunity cost at your square footage of production.
Right.
Right. So I think that we're going to see a lot more firms specializing in the area and more partnerships.
So do you think, what are the decision criteria for doing that? Should licensed producers take that in-house, or is that something that you can foresee them outsourcing to
I don't think there's enough people to outsource for everybody.
Right.
So yeah, I think probably most of these companies, and I think Aurora and Tantalus have both been really good at that. I'm not actually too sure what your company's been doing in terms of growing seeds, but acquiring seeds and growing seeds and having a specific section of your facility that's constantly dedicated to new SKUs is really important.
Okay, so how are we doing on time? Okay, I have about 5 more questions I can ask, or we can open it up. Well, why don't I just ask one more, and then we'll have time to open it up. And this one, I'm sure, will generate a lot of controversy. Oh. And I'm not looking at you, Dieter, when I say that.
The 2 publicly traded companies are just going, oh, please, no.
No, I have a hunch we're going to be in violent agreement here. Health Canada has a proposed 2.6%. Oh. Anybody in favor of that? An additional 2.6% fee. It's proposed. It's not here yet. What are our thoughts about that fee? They want to use it, from what I've read, to fund some of the services that they're currently undertaking on behalf of the licensed producers. But what is everybody's view on that, and what do you think those services should be? Dan, why don't we start with you?
I can't believe that I'm the guy. I did this in the podcast yesterday, and I'm going to stand up here and defend the regulator that put me through 1,869 days of a licensing process. But that team at Health Canada, the OMC, for the majority of that timeline was 30 people. So if we want to see a diverse, inclusive cannabis industry where a variety of different entrepreneurs can participate in various segments of this business, we need a regulator that's effective. Now, all of us in this room are going to come together and say, oh, but if we give the government money, they always waste it. Well, there have been a handful of LPs that have been pretty wasteful with resources, so maybe we should be, let he who's without sin cast the first stone. Ultimately, if you got into this business not thinking that the government was going to come for their pound of flesh, then you were naive. Look at the alcohol business. There's a great small-scale craft distillery that's a friend of mine in British Columbia. They retail for $76 a bottle. They take home $23. That's where this is going. That's why we need to be efficient with costs. That's why, because if there is excessive margin or there is a premium price point in the marketplace, that's going to end up as deadweight loss taken on by a regulator. So 2.6% to make Health Canada run efficiently and be able to actually process licenses and continue to iterate as a regulator. This is the most sophisticated cannabis regulation body on earth by a mile. You go down to Washington State, you go down to California, these cannabis businesses, it's ramshackle, it's run roughshod. In Washington State, there's a 10-day window in every cultivation cycle where you're allowed to use whatever pesticides you want. I mean, this is not the way to build an internationally viable and repeatable process. So all I know about OMC is it's the smartest group of bureaucrats that I've ever had the chance to interact with, and if they need to take their 2.6% to make that better over time, I personally support it.
I'll take the devil's advocate on that one. The fee itself isn't ever going to be an issue. Cost recovery is going to be a big part of any modern program. We don't want to see this burden passed on to the taxpayer, even though in some cases there's 6 levels of fees, summing up to a total of 31% to the consumer, and then there's the corporate income tax and others. So where possible, single window. It would have been nice if they would have all got together and come up with a more cohesive fee structure, because man, the burden when you have to deal with all this sort of stuff gets kind of ridiculous. But all I would hope is that it comes with service standards. So because of the pace that it was growing at, they would Health Canada would grow quickly and then restructure, and grow quickly and restructure. And for a bureaucracy within the federal government and then Health Canada, which is very much known for not moving quickly because just human health you got to be careful. They need those fees to be able to grow the team and do it properly. We just hope that those service standards are clearly communicated and there's a two-way street. So you can speak about the frustrations and just not knowing what's going on behind the curtain. It's like the Wizard of Oz. We expect that there'll be a transition so that we're able to support the larger industry, but that the flip side is we'll have more insight into what are our risks? Like, are we not going to get this vault license for the next 6 months, or is it 2? Because I'll plan around that. And if you're always having to plan for the worst case scenario, it gets kind of expensive and tiring.
So I'm going to ask the wizard right here. John, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know where the
Come on, do it.
From, but anyway. So
want to flip a coin?
No, but at Aphria, we have advocated for quite a while that there should be some type of fee or cost recovery for the government. And along with that, we were always looking for improved service. So to be clear, we've touched on a little bit. There's lots that we could complain about timeliness of Health Canada and how they've managed manage the entire program. But I think if you really look at the entire program in totality, Health Canada has done a fantastic job with this program. It's the model for the world. And as other countries around the globe look at how they're going to legalize cannabis or put a medical program in place, they really look at what Health Canada's done, and they take that model and move it around the globe. So I think Health Canada has done a fantastic job. With that said, there's lots of holes and there's lots of opportunity for them to improve service. So it's really our expectation that with a fee that we're going to see better interaction, more timely responses to amendments, emails, and such. And we also hope that the changes or the surprise changes that we talked about earlier, or their need to make changes, hopefully they can be more upfront about those, or actually give us some lead time. And that's one of the things that sometimes happens. Sometimes there's not a lot of lead time in these changes, and as well as even training their staff. So it's interesting that Dieter touched on it. They add people and reorganize. We would get people that would come, and we would have certain things inspected for 4 years, and then somebody new would come and say, "Oh, you can't do it that way." And everybody's looked at it for 4 years, and everybody's okay with it. So there's also a lot of training that they need to do and make sure that it's all their inspectors look at all the opportunities the same way. So we expect an improved service. I think I do. I'm sure Dieter probably would say the same. It's going to take time for them to actually get that service level up to what we actually expect. But the idea is, without them having a fee, or without them charging us something for it, us to expect that type of service, I think is from a federal bureaucratic government organization is not reasonable. So I think it's the right direction for what's going on.
I'd also add just a small point. They don't get to really sit on panels like this and whinge about LPs, which I think is kind of unfair.
They tell consultants that don't.
I know, but we're not all created equal, and a lot of them have done stupid stuff that's put Health Canada in a difficult place. So there are reasons for their intransigence at points, because there's been some boneheads out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody expects that the Canadian taxpayer is going to pick up the cost for developing the industry, but it is interesting that they take 2.6% of top line revenue.
Gross, yeah, it's a counter incentive.
And that's
for a
not
regulator.
done in any other industry. So
Yeah.
I think that there are some legitimate industry gripes.
They participate in my success now. Let's see how those inspectors behave.
They also don't want to have to go and audit you to figure out how your expense accounting works, because if there's a group of people that can do a creative expense accounting, it sure is LPs.
We're big enough that the CRA's asked us to put an office in so they can come and sit on our site all day.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I'm getting some hand signals. There are some questions from the audience. I can't see if there's anybody there, but there's somebody behind. Please weigh in, sir or madam.
Hi, Eric Williams from Burlington High Society. My question is about female-centric cannabis products. Is there anything operationally substantive towards developing that, or is it primarily a branding thing?
You're going to sit up and ask this panel of men about our opinions on female cannabis products?
Well, you're still
Not that
involved
there's
in
anything
making
wrong
them
with
as
that.
well, I assume, right?
So I'll tell you, at Aphria, we're working with we've got a robust R&D department, and we're definitely looking at developing innovative products for the whole spectrum of consumers. So women are definitely front and center in our mindset of consumers and or new consumers. So we're absolutely working on products for women. So it may not necessarily just be a genetic thing, but it might be how we refine the product or extract product or how the finished product ends up being. But it's definitely on our mind.
Okay, women are historically a very underserviced demographic in the cannabis industry. I think 80% of cannabis consumers in California are men as of today. Like, that was the last numbers that I saw. So you could look at that like maybe it's smart for LPs to play towards the existing user base, or maybe it's important that we start bringing women more and more into this conversation. The way I see that problem is the only way that Tantalus Labs would approach women-specific branding, lady-specific branding, is by collaborating with female entrepreneurs so that we can have products for women, by women. I'm in absolutely no position to market to women. They're an entirely more sophisticated demographic to market to, and as a result, I think that we're probably going to stay away from it until we find some female entrepreneurs that want to come into our story and help us tell it to people of their own ilk.
Yeah, and I think cannabinoid science is evolving in such a way as well that we're starting to understand that there's sex differences between the endocannabinoid systems of men and women, and we don't really know a lot about that. And I think as our education grows, that we'll probably be able to formulate products better for different genders.
Dieter, do you have any?
Well, you can take a look at our brand portfolio and know that wasn't really something that we targeted. But I agree with Dan that there are people far more qualified than me to speak to what or how you would market to a specific segment like that. I have I'm lucky to say that I'm just a ground pounder. I'm here to make sure that we get the product to market. How it appears in the market is, I'll get the feedback, but it's not for me to design.
Great, thank you guys. Another question there, please.
This one's more targeted at John Cervini. So if you're looking to, you want to automate your whole process, but you're wanting to maximize quality as well, what part of the process would you not automate?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say, today we've been actually looking at So let me start from the beginning. We really started and looked at the entire process to see where the low-hanging fruit was on automation. I think today still there's not a lot of automation around our trimming process. So to say that we're not hand trimming, but there's still a lot of manual work being done around how we trim the product. So that's where it really gets tough. So when you're actually harvesting the product to the end result, you have to be careful on how you manage the product, that you don't damage the product, that you don't not knocking off trichomes, but you're getting it trimmed to its maximum amount. So the reality of it is, in that whole area, really from harvest to bottling, there's a whole bunch of different areas there that we're still doing things by hand or being very careful with the product. So there's potentials for low automation. At the same time, we're trying to automate as much as we can, but that's the very sensitive product. So that's where we're being very careful with it.
Sure.
And you'll have to probably repeat it. Genetics versus the rec pipeline film. Will large LPs be able to come out with summer hits and quick versus the craft guys? Are you guys oil tankers and they're in Zodiacs?
Well, those are mixed metaphors and analogies in two sentences.
That one.
Do repeat the question. Just so
I'd love to hear it.
Now I feel like Dieter. Ryan, can you best repeat that question, because I don't want to get into your area.
Well, I guess the question, as I understand it, is can the LPs ramp up special small batch products that might be seasonal? And I think the reality behind that is probably not. It's a long process to go from seed to identifying a specific plant that has a desirable flavor or effect, and then taking that, once you have that laboratory analysis, you have to go back to the beginning of your process and multiply that plant so that you can do production batches. So I think that we'll probably see teaser batches of new things that are coming out, but there is an inherent runway to ramping up a product like that, something that's new. And they're something that are introduced over time. It's not like you can have everything all at once and just decide to ramp things up. So I think it's just like ramping up any production chain. There's inherent problems to doing that. You can't go from 0 to 100.
It's a design choice too, because if you build a single facility that can pivot quickly, you've got wasted square footage that is not being used in lean manufacturing. It's holding biomass to allow you to pivot quickly. So you can have that planning. But there are other opportunities for large oil tankers to be nimble, and that could be centralizing your genetic production, your seed stock, plant tissue culture, however you want to do that, and feeding other facilities, or in our case, have smaller facilities and larger ones, and then build an asset. We converted CCANs into genetic transport vehicles, so we can repopulate and pivot as we need. But regularly, it's a minimum of 5 months, more like 9 months, for a facility to change its trajectory and production plan. 9 months doesn't really allow you to do what you're talking about. So the small guys, the little micros, they can move a lot faster.
Or the mid-range,
Yeah.
mid-range size. So this is a story about market segmentation. There's a lot of stories in the LP space about we're going to own it all. We're going to be, from product development all the way through to large-scale production, all the way through to retail experiences, vertically integrated. And at Tantalus Labs, we know that we have to stay in our lane, and we really like genetic development. We think breeding is super exciting. My cannabis specialists have been breeding for a really long time, and it's a treasure hunt on these phenotype runs where you're taking a bunch of seeds that all have disparate genetics. You're finding the most exciting individuals within those populations, and then you're replicating them. That's something that we really enjoy, and it's something that we intend to be really good at. Now, having 75,000 square feet of production, that's just enough for us to release products in a limited way into the market to gauge market anticipation. When we prove that some new black OG Kush is absolutely amazing and consumers are ready to spend $14, $15 a gram on it consistently, then we can take that genetic and find partners with larger production footprints who can help us replicate it using the thoroughly datafied, thoroughly regimented processes that we have that we can then pass on to and empower other producers. I don't think that we intend to build 5 million square feet of production. There's a lot of funded capacity that's coming up in the business, and so there will be firms such as Tantalus Labs that specialize.
Funded capacity, you like that one?
Funded capacity. So find your lane and swim in that lane.
Yeah, I gotta chirp in on that one a little bit. I think
And we also have other speakers, guys. So.
Cannabis to date has been a bit of a treasure hunt. And that's the way that breeding has been done, largely because it's not done by people that understand breeding. And I think as more firms start investing in real breeding programs, that's not the way that things are going to be done. Real breeding is about having a goal in mind and knowing where you're going to, and how to lay out the path to get to that destination. Whereas a lot of people right now are just kind of randomly crossing plants with no intention and then looking to find, oh, look, we found a plant that's better than the other one. Well, that's great that it's better, but that's not how you build elite germplasm, right? So,
Ryan, I'm going to leave you with the last word. This was fantastic. I learned a lot. All of you guys are sticking around here for the rest of the day, I hope so. I welcome everybody to come up and ask questions, but I want to thank you. That was fantastic. Appreciate it.
well,
Good.